DeHavilland would like to welcome you to the new event that we have. How fit is EU for the Fit for 55? And for this subject, we wouldn't have better speakers than speakers from a variety of stakeholders for this event. So I'm going to start the introduction. I'm Christina Kouremenou, Senior Consultant for DeHavilland EU, our representation office in Brussels. We're an information monitoring services and we track policy and legislative updates across EU. Together with us today, we have Mr. Kieran Watkins from Freshfields, a global law firm specialized in various areas that they get impacted by EU policies, and they provide strategic advice to multiple stakeholders about various policy issues. Following, we have with us the MEP, Mr. Ismail Ertug. He is the rapporteur for the deployment of alternative fuels infrastructure in the European Parliament, and also the rapporteur for the opinion for the batteries and waste batteries. Following, we have Mr. Carl van der Horst, that he is the Director for European Affairs for Tata Steel, a company that specializes on the automotive industry, packaging, as well on infrastructure and on various topics of renewable energy. To this regard, I would like to invite our speakers to provide some introductory remarks and a short bio for them and how interested they are in these activities. So I propose, Kieran, you go first.
Great, thanks a lot, Christina. Good morning, everyone, and a big thank you to DeHavilland for organising this exciting event. It's a real pleasure to be speaking on such a distinguished panel, talking about energy and the Fit for 55 package. I just wanted to start with a very quick overview of Freshfields and our EU regulatory and public affairs team. So some of you might know Freshfields, Bruckhaus, Deringer as a successful law firm, but we also have a thriving public affairs team based in Brussels, which is an integral part of our legal practice. Our team of consultants are supporting international clients, both public and private actors. And my role has been to help clients predict and influence the environment, the regulatory environment in the field of sustainability. So a big part of chunk of my work at the moment has been on energy and climate change, arguably two of the most pressing issues facing society today, as the energy crisis shows. And I think as a senior consultant working in the Brussels bubble over the past few years, I've seen growing interest from clients and companies into sustainability. We see a lot of that has stemmed from the beginning of Ursula von der Leyen's presidency of the European Commission and her proposal for an EU Green Deal. That was presented obviously in 2019 and set an ambition for the EU to become climate neutral by 2050. Subsequently was underpinned by the adoption of the European Climate Law, which made the target a binding obligation. And I think our clients recognise the significance of the EU's mission to decarbonise and see the EU really as a pioneering global actor in ensuring that the world tackles global warming. So, with that in mind, we were all eagerly awaiting, consultants, clients alike, for the Fit for 55 package to be published. It's finally presented in July 2021, when the Commission came out with a package of measures which really focused on reducing emissions in specific sectors, heavy industry to transport, with the objective of cutting emissions by at least 55% by 2030. So we saw revision proposals of existing files, Renewable Energy Directive, Emissions Trading System. We saw new proposals, ambitious proposals like the Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, proposals for greening aviation, maritime fuel sectors, and no doubt we'll be discussing more of these later. I think, for our clients and from what I've seen, is that it's important to have these files published quickly and in order to give them regulatory certainty for future investments, to help them become more sustainable. I think in the last few years, a lot of our clients, a lot of companies are now committed publicly to reducing emissions to reach net zero by 2050, sometimes even earlier. Ourselves at Freshfields are also committed to net zero, so it's really important have that long-term kind of regulatory goals, setting clear targets and standards. So I think very pleased to see that von der Leyen's Commission had focused on a long-term trajectory with long-term goals, that all of the Commission Directorate Generals are working together to promote sustainability, the downside of that is it makes policy making quite complex. There's lots of different people who want to have a voice, want to have a say, and the urgency of the climate crisis has also sped up, particularly the pre-legislative process, which sometimes makes it difficult for stakeholders to interact and to get their view across. That's where my role as a consultant comes in, and we've been trying to make sure that all our clients have a voice and are heard by relevant actors. And now Fit for 55 is in the hands of the legislators. Parliament and Council are working hard. We've seen good progress on some files. Some progress could be made, and things could be a bit quicker on others. But the ambition is certainly there, and hopefully we'll see some files adopted and new legislation in place by 2023. And really interested to hear, especially from our guest, Mr. Ertug, on the timeline and what he thinks about the adoption of those files. But very happy to answer more questions on the specific files later. But I think for now I'll be quiet and pass it on to someone else. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kieran, for giving us an overview of the areas that you work with Freshfields. You do an amazing work, and exactly taking into account what you mentioned, we know that Fit for 55 really has an impact on a lot of different aspects in the EU as well. It's very important for public affairs professionals, but also for national governments and for the private sector and the industry. That's why we have the best speakers today to provide us with an overview. To this regard, I would like to pass the floor for a couple of introductory remarks to MEP Ismail Ertug, a very famous MEP in the world of transport and alternative fuels. Mr. Ertug, we have been following your activities. We know how big advocate you are for the EU to move forward with the targets, to increase collaboration and to increase transparency in the ways that we work together and how the legislators work together. Mr. Ertug, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, dear Christina, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, also thanks a lot for the invitation. I think it comes to a good time because we in the European Parliament, we are now working on the files, and I think we are coming closer. Some of the files has been voted already in their responsible committees, and we in the Transport Committee, as Mr. Watkins said, are working on the important files within the Fit for 55, which is in particular the AFIR, the Alternative Fuels Infrastructure Regulation, the Refuel Aviation, and the Fuel Maritime files. At the same time, the Transport Committee has also the obligation to provide some positions to the other reports, which are mainly in the ENVI committee. Some of them are also in the ITRE, the EPPD, for example. So what I want to say is, as you said, Christina, we in the European Union, and I have to mention the European Commission, they did a good job, even when we look 8 or 10 years ago. 2013, this is that what I want to start to argue. 2013, they came with the first piece of legislation, which was at that time the AFID with D, because it was a directive. Even there, I think the proposal was really good by the Commission. They set indicative and measurable targets to all the member states. At that time, we had 28 member states. But unfortunately, the Council, they have, I think, I should say that in that way, they have destroyed it totally. They put out the substance of this legislation. Unfortunately, because of this, I would say we have lost as European Union at least 6 years. At 6 years, and after this, I have to say the diesel scandal came up. We had the Fridays for Future movement. We had the Paris Agreement. So I would say the world changed dramatically in our mobility world, and the Fit for 55 is a result of this societal changes. And now within the AFIR, the European Commission once again, in my eyes, came with a good proposal, which is ambitious, which shows in which direction we have to go. But I don't want to neglect one issue, which is a handicap for the European Parliament. We all know that this Fit for 55 includes around 11 or 12 dossiers, which I would say are directly or indirectly linked to each other. And this is the difficulty here. we don't have a mechanism within the parliament in order to align this or synchronize these documents and these legislations. I think there is no systematic or structure, because the European Parliament, we have 7 different groups, we have 706 members, we have different committees, all of them have their own rapporteurs, all of them have their own shadow rapporteurs, and it's incredibly difficult to align that. You could have in the one committee a very progressive member, whereas in another committee or another committee it could be a conservative one. That makes it so difficult. What we can do, and we are in, for example, in my own group, Socialists and Democrats, we have established a so-called Fit for 55 task force, which has exactly this aim and this target in order to bring the different files together and align them and synchronize that. And I can tell you it's difficult enough not only to talk about that, also to find some common positions. But first of all, you have to deduct these kind of points where you are not at the same line. In the AFIR, we have I have to say, I have the lucky position that the industry, the NGOs, and the main parties and groups, they are in favor of having some ambitious targets for the AFIR. We have here the distinction between the heavy-duty vehicles and the light-duty vehicles. I think all those who are familiar with this file, they know in the within the light-duty vehicles part, we have a two-layer approach, I would say. First, which is distance-based. The other part is the fleet-based, which gives a certain kind of dynamism to the development of these kind of infrastructure, the deployments. When it comes to the heavy-duty vehicles, we have the distance-based approach, but even there we have to look for some kind of flexibility, which should not open up loopholes for those member states who are, I would say, in the periphery, in the North Sweden or in more rural areas, without giving them the loopholes, but at the same time giving a certain kind of flexibility, which will be part of the request by the Council, I would say. Within the AFIR, we have also included, or we will include, some mechanism towards the member states, how to force the member states in order to that they have to fulfill their targets. We include, and we will, at least me as a rapporteur, I have included a sanction mechanism towards the member states, a second sanction mechanism which goes from the member states towards the companies who are obliged to come up with the deployment of this infrastructure. And not to forget, the user friendliness is very important. We want to have a big spread of this infrastructure all around the European Union. For the moment, we all know we have the difficulty that around 70–75% of the infrastructure is located only in 3 member states, Germany, France, and Netherlands. I would say this cannot be like this. We have to spread that technology, and we have to spread the cars away. And in particular, the industry, the OEMs, they are waiting for this kind of infrastructure, because otherwise they could not sell their cars. And if they don't sell their cars, they won't be able to fulfill the CO2 fleet targets. Therefore, it's a crucial legislation, and maybe in the next few minutes, I can tell you a little bit more about the discussions within the shadow meetings, what we have already agreed, or where are a little bit the crushing points. But so far, I would say as an introduction should be fine. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ertug. And indeed, you touch upon a lot of topics that they are of the interest of a lot of our clients. And of course, all eyes are on you when you are discussing the challenges you are facing, but not only that, the challenges that the EU member states they are facing when they have to implement the new regulations and the new proposals from the Commission. And in fact, your job as a rapporteur is very important, but also is very challenging exactly to balance different interests among stakeholders in the European Parliament, something that we all recognize. Taking into account that the impact of the policy and the legislative updates by the European Commission varies per sector, we have the best speaker to provide us a bit more of an update from the industry side, Mr. Kouremenou. which I would like to invite to his introductory comments and tell us a bit how Tata Steel sees the whole Fit for 55. What is the perspective of the new provisions that they are proposed there, and how the industry could potentially adapt to what the European Commission proposes? Mr. Karl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you for DeHavilland for having me on this panel. Tata Steel produces in the Netherlands, in IJmuiden, a coastal city, around 7 million tons of steel per year. We do that currently from iron ore and coal. Soon we will do that from iron ore and hydrogen. We have service centers and processing sites across Europe and also in the United States. We employ about 9,000 people at our steel-making site in the Netherlands, and 14,000 in total. Steel is a crucial product for society. We produce steel for everyone. Our steel is used in washing machines, in our houses, offices, cars, buses, trains, batteries, cans for baby milk. The list is endless. If it is not made from steel, it is made with steel. Our steel is used in the machines that make solar panels and the machines that harvest our food. Steel is also the foundation for the transition to decarbonize society. Steel is used in wind towers, in batteries for electric vehicles, and so on. So it is important that we produce steel in a green, clean, and circular way. And although our site in the Netherlands is one of the best performing sites in the world, in Europe at least, we are aware that we need to minimize the burden to society and reduce our CO2 emissions radically. Our plans to change the way we produce will reduce our CO2 emissions with 40% in 2030, 75 to 80% before 2040. And we want to be net zero in 2050. Steel is also subject to global competitive forces. It is one of the most traded products in the world. There is overcapacity, and our competitors from outside Europe do not yet face the same important and radical transformation demands that we have, and they certainly do not have the same cost that we have. So this transformation can only be done successful if we do it together with society, with all stakeholders, with politics, with government, with NGOs, with civil society at large. We, as steel company, as steel industry, will have to invest and execute our products, but we will also need a policy framework that enables us to invest and continue to compete. This means a working carbon border adjustment mechanism at the border and an EU emissions trading scheme that supports the transition and not hampers it. An integral approach to policy, no double regulation. We also need sufficient green hydrogen at an affordable cost and infrastructure to make that happen. A well-designed CBAM should ensure a level playing field. This means that we can continue to compete inside Europe, but also outside Europe, serve our customers and support the transition to be a net zero steel producer by 2050. A well-designed CBAM addresses the risk of carbon leakage. The EU ETS currently takes this into account through free allowances, but they will disappear at some point. It is necessary to look carefully at how these free rides can be phased out, and it cannot be done in one go. That could lead to an excessive price increase. The market will slowly get used to CBAM's new system. Therefore, the CBAM and the ETS free allowances will have to coexist temporarily. Unfortunately, the way the European Parliament and in particular the Environment Committee is going now is not helping. CBAM will be totally untested when it enters into force in 2026. Well, at least the levy will come into force, according to the proposals of the Commission. Therefore, it should complement free allocation for a serious transition period so that the EU companies can focus financial resources on low-carbon projects rather than on compliance costs. This would also reduce the impact of downstream sectors as well as on consumer prices. The rapid phase-out now proposed by the Environment Committee is totally unrealistic. It will only bring a shock to the system with the risk of downstream sectors moving outside the EU for carbon leakage and trade partners taking retaliatory measures. There is no solution in the proposals of the Commission nor in the proposals of the Parliament so far for exports. CBAM will only address imports. We will not be able to compete in markets outside Europe because we will have the high cost and our competitors outside Europe won't. This is a clear presentation for the steel industry. Tata Steel, for instance, exports approximately 25% outside the EU, to a very large extent to the US. We are serving the US market for 70 years, 70. But this is at risk. A recent German report says that a fully effective CBAM with no solution for exports will lead to 20% loss of capacity, which equates in their study to about 30,000 jobs in Germany. That is. So the Fit for 55 proposal as a whole is very important for the steel industry. It is important for us as a company, and we are committed to achieving the targets, but we need, as I said before, the right policies, the right framework, and we need to do it together. And it should not be a burden to industry alone. And I think I stop there for my introductory remarks.
Thank you very much, Carl, for providing your input. Exactly, and you touched on issues that we closely monitor, exactly like how the European Parliament works, how we see how the decisions can affect stakeholders, how we move forward to that, or if any modifications that need to be done in the sake of a broader consensus among the European Parliament. So in this regard, we can move on to the next stage of our session. So I would like to invite our participants to provide a presentation of the state of Fit for 55. So during this session, we are going to have presentations by our speakers on main points that they have identified, areas of the Fit for 55 that they would like to point out and see their evolution, their progress, how we move collectively in the EU towards the green transition, but in a successful and very fair way. Not only that, but taking into account the points made by Mr. Ismail Ertug, by MEP Ismail Ertug before, it's true that a lot of provisions in the Fit for 55, they have their basis on efforts and decisions that they have started way earlier. So during these sessions, we want to see where do we stand right now on May 2022, since July 2021, when Fit for 55 was first introduced by the European Commission. Prices, energy prices, they start rising already back in August. Then we have the war in Ukraine with Russia. So there we see the impact in the markets, and this pushed for a further development to make our targets way more ambitious, to move and accelerate the green transition. Where do we stand though right now? So this is a question that our speakers, they will really try to provide additional information for it. So to this regard, I would like to invite Mr. Kieran Watkins from Freshfields to give us an overview of the state of play. Kieran, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Christina. I mean, firstly, just to say that from Freshfields side, we obviously strongly condemn the actions of the Russian government in Ukraine. We express a solidarity with all those affected. And you're right, obviously the current energy crisis is naturally having a big impact on business, public stakeholders, and also on the adoption of Fit for 55 files. A lot of people are concerned, customers, as I mentioned, our clients as well. They're worried about slowdowns in supply chains. They're worried that investments in renewables will fall short. So there's a lot going on. It's a situation which is changing day to day and requires constant monitoring. But I think, the Commission's response, I think it's important to remember that energy prices were rising before the Ukraine invasion. So, mostly as a result of production restarting after COVID-19. So there was already an issue at the end of last year. The Commission came forward with initially a toolbox of measures in October last year, which looked to tackle the exceptional rise in energy prices. They introduced simpler state aid processes, targeted tax reductions. The Commission then came forward in March this year with its Repower EU communication, which presented lots of actions to reduce the EU's dependency on Russian fossil fuels and ensure that there's affordable and sustainable energy production. And then last week we had the follow-up Repower EU plan. That was sort of part of a mini EU energy package where the Commission presented concrete actions to really phase out fossil fuels from Russia by 2027, with clear monetary figures as well, and the investment that's needed. And I think, from a business perspective and putting it into the context of Fit for 55, the REPowerEU plan does not undermine the Fit for 55. It strengthens it, and I think that's really important. We didn't, I think, on behalf of industry and some of our clients, we didn't want to see a whole new energy package that was presented after the Fit for 55 last year. So it's good that that this plan is really strengthening some of the targets, looking to really increase the availability of different renewable fuels such as hydrogen. We've seen things on solar, wind, biomethane, bioenergy as well. I think that's all very positive, and it obviously signals that investment in these fuels will continue and needs to rapidly increase. So that's really positive, and links in very well with the Fit for 55 package. I think politically it's interesting from the REPowerEU plan to see whether the rise in energy and the whole energy price context, whether there will be a short-term lead in an increase of coal and oil being burned in Europe to kind of mitigate the high energy bills. That's a challenge. I think something that needs to be thought about. Interested to see what European leaders say next week in the energy summit, or the European Council summit, where energy will be a main focus. And arguably there's questions about money as well. Where will the money come to fund all of this? The Commission has presented a proposal to use existing funds from the recovery and resilience facilities to release extra allowances from the market stability reserve. But is that enough? Again, interested to hear from some of the other stakeholders on this panel what they think. But I think for Fit for 55, the commitment to finish these files and to adopt them will continue. There's been a few voices, I think, that's called for a pause. And obviously, yes, there are some rightful or wrongly calls for some of the files to be phased in later, to make sure that it's gradual. But I think we're still going to see these files adopted. I don't think there is a majority in the Parliament or the Council who wants to see these files stop and to go back to the drawing board. If anything, it's let's get these files adopted quickly, and we see that with a lot of files. It was mentioned the MV committee, CBAM and ETS. Those were adopted the reports last week in the committee, in the council. They're also coming hopefully to a general approach on some of the key files next month. So a lot of things are happening, and I think it's positive if it means that we can get to a point where we're starting to really help mitigate the energy bills that are obviously increasing for consumers in the industry.
Thank you, Kieran, for this overview. It's true, exactly. Taking into account the Kieran updates and the Commission's efforts with the REPowerEU, with the new minimum gas storage regulation that the Commission has proposed. In this sense, it's true, we see right now that the events that they happen in Ukraine with the Ukrainian-Russian war, it really pushes the EU to really accelerate their green transition. So this brings up a lot of efforts on policy and legislative way. And what is very interesting is the fact that Fit for 55, the particularity of this initiative by the Commission, it touches upon various sectors. It's not just exclusively, as you mentioned, energy, it's renewable resources, it's infrastructure, mobility. So things that they touch upon of the daily life, both of the industry and the consumer. So the EU has really a large sector to regulate and find the appropriate solutions. To this regard, of course, we cannot neglect the fact that transport plays a major role on how we move on to the green transitions. And we wouldn't have a better person to give us an overview of where we stand right now with the deployment of alternative fuels than Mr. Ismail Ertug. Mr. Ertug, I would like to invite you to give us an overview of how the negotiations they go to within the European Parliament. What do you see as challenges currently, and where do you see areas that they progress? Or how the Parliament in your work really takes into account the REPowerEU new provisions in the negotiations. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Christina. The situation is the following one, that, as always, I would say the member states, they are slowing down the process. They are not as ambitious as the Commission, not to talk about the ambition level of the European Parliament. So within the European Parliament, and I think this is not a secret anymore, we have a good working relation within the different groups. Even the conservative groups, they are interested in a good outcome of this legislation. When it comes to the ambition level, so we all know that the European Commission, sorry, they came with a proposal for every, I'm talking now about the light duty vehicle as example, for every duty vehicle, better electric vehicle, 1 kilowatt hour of energy has to be deployed. So this is fine. This is fine, and even this, in a certain extent, is too much for some member states. But this is the Commission's ambition level, and we in the European Parliament, we want to bring them up. That does mean we want to make it 3 times more. That does mean for every BEV, we want to oblige the member states to deploy 3 kilowatt hours, but not until the end. In order to avoid some stranded assets, we have to find a way how to ramp up the deployments in an early stage like this. So that does mean we made some stepwise approach. Let me explain it like that. It will start with 3 kilowatt hours. Then after a certain number of electric vehicles in the market, we will have 2 kilowatt hours, and then in the end we will finalize with 1 kilowatt hours. This will guarantee a fast ramp up for the within the next 2-3 years within the European Union, all around the European Union. And I think this is a good idea. When we read the proposal or the compromise text by the French presidency, we see that they are not so ambitious, but we will see. We look with one eye to the Council, but we are the European Parliament. We are representing the people, and we are going our way. We are close to the industry. We're close to the people. We want to have the transformation, and there is no argument which can stop us as Parliament, to be honest. When it comes to the heavy-duty vehicles, we have approach which goes into the same direction. We have an ambition plan compared to the member states. So I have forgotten to say the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. This is one step back. Sorry for this. One step back to the light-duty vehicles. I explained the stepwise approach for the BEV, and we have also a stepwise approach for the plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. But the numbers will be lower. That's for sure. It will be 2 kilowatts when we start. It will go down to 1.66, 1.33, and 1 kilowatt, and finally 0.66, which is also the proposal, initial proposal by the European Commission. So now I want to lead over to the heavy-duty vehicles. We have taken over the proposal of the European Commission till 2025. Every 60 kilometer in the 10T core network increase power charging infrastructure has to be deployed. We have increased, this is our ambition level compared to the Commission, the power output per charging location. We distinguish between a pool and a single charging station. The pool European Commission's proposal was 1,400 kilowatts. We increased that to 2,000 kilowatt hours, but the charging station, one charging station has to have at least 700 kilowatt hours. So this is doubling the approach of European Commission. The same goes for 2030. We have 2030 higher numbers. That does mean 3,500 kilowatt hours for the pool is the Commission proposal, and we as the European Parliament, we want to increase that to 5,000 kilowatt in the pool, and the 700 kilowatt hours per charging station will remain. For the comprehensive 10T comprehensive network, we have 2030 and 2035 targets. which is also higher as that what the European Commission came across. So we also included the safe and secure parking within this legislation. All those who followed the Mobility Package 1 discussion 2 and 3 years ago, they know that we had we have some goals when it comes to the trucks, how to park the trucks, where to park the trucks. This is important. They have to have safe and secure parking areas. And with this idea, we included into this text as well. At the Commission, at least they have included it into the paper. They want to have until 2030 100 kilowatt charging stations, 100 kilowatt charging stations in every of the safe and secure parking areas. And we have doubled that for 2025. We made it 5 years earlier, double amount. And the 2030, we want to have 4 times more than the European Commission. Also urban nodes, and that brings me to another question. Christina, you said, or a question in the chat, which is aligned, which dossiers are more aligned with each other and so on. The urban nodes debate is directly linked to the 10T legislation, which is ongoing right now, also in the Parliament. The European Commission here, they included some urban nodes. They want to have also power output charging location pools in the urban nodes. And I don't want to go too much into the numbers because this would confuse our colleagues. Therefore, I want to say that urban nodes are also included. There is no discussion within the Parliament so far on that urban nodes. But the next topic is subject of discussion, which is the LNG. As you can imagine, we have on LNG level, the European Commission here, they came up with a LNG for heavy-duty vehicles on the 10T core network until 2025. They mentioned it appropriate number without naming clearly what is appropriate. And I have deleted that totally the requirements for LNG on the road for heavy-duty vehicles. There are different reasons for it, but this is subject of discussion. We have those groups, I would say mainly the conservatives and to a certain extent also the liberals. They want to have the LNG infrastructure, whereas I have to guarantee that the money has to be used in the best possible way because we are dealing with taxpayers' money. Therefore, in my eyes, LNG is more needed in a maritime area rather than LNG, because for the moment, even now, we have enough infrastructure on European roads, and the money has to be used, in my eyes, for more important, for more or for better, for more sustainable electricity or technology. I mentioned the user friendliness and the barrier-free charging. Even there, so far, we don't have big discussions within the Parliament, within the shadow meetings, I have to say first, because we haven't discussed yet in the plenary about this. There is a discussion ongoing to display an ad hoc price, because we will have in the future some contract-based charging, but at the same time, on the other hand side, we will have some ad hoc charging as well, and we want to guarantee, we want to save the consumers that it has, in the end, it has to be user-friendly and transparent in particular, and we mentioned we want to have it in a price per kilowatt hour charging, which has to be seen in the display. Another discussion which is ongoing is, but we haven't started yet the discussion on this Article 18 and others. We will have discussions in the next bundle of dossiers on hydrogen, how to use hydrogen. Hydrogen, in my eyes, has to be used also in the heavy-duty vehicle sector as well. And we need both technologies, that does mean electrification and at the same time giving the hydrogen technology a chance, because we cannot, in my eyes, at least not in the next 5, 7, 10, 15 years, to electrify all around the mobility in the European Union. And until this time, we will definitely real numbers of hydrogen as well. And for this technology, we have to be prepared. And I don't, final sentence, and I don't want to make the same mistake what we did 8 years ago with the chicken and egg problem occurred at that time. You remember, on the electrification, on the electro charging infrastructure, and for heavy duty vehicles, the industry is waiting. We want to break through this chicken and egg problem, giving a certain number of infrastructure possibilities for heavy duty vehicles and for other vehicles. And with this, I would say we will be good prepared for the trilogues with the Council.
Thank you, Mr. Ertug. And I'm pretty sure, yes, we are all listening very carefully, your points. And the areas that you have been currently working is true. With the current political updates, we see that there is an increased energy prices, that they can be proven to be a burden both for consumers and for the industry. And really, we need solutions on EU level that they really address those topics, and they create an environment where we can move through the green transition, but at the same time, we tackle the financial burden in a cost-efficient way. It's true, as you mentioned, that in EU, we need further infrastructure. We have specific EU member states, such as France, Germany, Netherlands, that they have progressed more into create proper infrastructure to lead towards the green transition, but this is not the case for other EU member states. And now with the current sanction packages, with the current changes that we see from the imports of fossil fuels and how the EU tries to decouple itself from Russia, those are challenges that they're going to keep emerging, and they will need new ways and new measures to tackle them. Industry is the one on the forefront right now that they really need to adapt to it and also find solutions. So we have with us Tata Steel, and company, of course, that is very that works with the automotive and the infrastructure sector. Steel is one of the materials that is really used on renewable energy to transfer the energy, create the proper infrastructure. So for sure, these are issues that they are really under the monitor of Tata Steel. So to this regard, I would like to invite Carl to give us a perspective from the industry for all the topics that we have discussed so far, both from Freshfields and from the European Parliament. Carl, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure if I'm going to discuss all topics that have been on the table so far. What for us is really important is that we will be enabled to make the transition, and that is for us key. We need to change the way we produce, but we need to remain competitive and be able to produce here in Europe. That is all the more important now that we have this whole discussion because of the Ukrainian war, but also before, about dependency of others. And we do not want to be dependent on our energy, our gas from Mr. Vladimir Putin. The question is that do we want to become dependent for our steel or other materials from someone like Mr. Kouremenou, for instance. So that is an important thing. The policy framework needs to be such that we can remain producing steel and other materials in Europe as well. And for that, we need a reliable and a predictable policy framework, predictable rules and regulations. And if you look, for instance, on the proposal from the Commission now on Repower EU, where they suggest to use allowances from the Market Stability Reserve to actually generate money for to finance this becoming independent from Russia. That's not what the Market Stability Reserve was meant for. The Market Stability Reserve was actually meant to create, to make the market stable. It is in the word itself, Market Stability Reserve. And now, if the Commission or the EU is using this reserve basically at will, when when the need is there. For other purposes, this is not predictable, and this will have an effect on the market. And I'm not saying whether it is good for us or it's not good for us, because you can argue that introducing those allowances now will reduce the carbon price, which is makes the cost level a little bit less. The fact is that the point is that it is not good to interfere in a system with a system that is destined for something else, meant for something else. Mr. Ertug, in his opening remarks, highlighted, and I think rightly so, the point that in the European Parliament there is not enough coordination or alignment of the Fit for 55 proposals. There are many proposals, there are many committees, rapporteurs, and so on. And actually, in his second session, he gave an example of that. He pleads, if I'm not mistaken, to also start using hydrogen for heavy-duty vehicles. And I can understand that from a certain point of view. But in the foreseeable future, sorry, let's say the next 10 years, there will probably be not enough hydrogen, at least green hydrogen, to meet all the demands. And so you have to think, we have to think about where to use the hydrogen that becomes available. And in our view, this hydrogen needs to go to those industries, those processes where you can abate most, where you can have the most use of them, which is, in our view, industry and not transport. I'm not saying that transport over time should also, those who cannot use hydrogen, but at least in the beginning, the focus should be on where the use of hydrogen has the most value, and that, in our view, should be industry. So that is an example of where this coordination and alignment can improve. I mentioned in my introductory remark very briefly, but no double regulation and that kind of stuff. If you look at the proposals from the Commission and also now the proposals from the European Parliament, see that there is for the free allowances of the ETS, conditionality is introduced. So part of the free allowances will be conditional on our neutral plans, environmental plans, whatever they want to give it. But free allowances are a so-called carbon leakage measure. And we need to not dilute things by making those carbon leakage protection measures conditional upon something else, maybe a carbon neutral plan, because the transition will be fueled, if I can put it like that, by the ETS itself. And you have got its cap and trade system, and the cap will go down every year by, well, depends a bit what we look at the end, but in the proposal of the Commission by 4.2% every year until 2030. That in itself will force industry, companies like my company, to actually make this transition. There's no need for conditionality plans for environmental plans. So these are all things that make life, let's say, difficult, and it's not helping. It's not in the spirit of working together to make this transition happen. And I think I leave it to that.
Thank you, Karel. So I don't know if Mr. Ertug would like to respond to any of the points that Karel just made. Mr. Ertug, let me know. If not, I can proceed with questions.
Well, maybe just a point what Karel has mentioned, a little bit the competition between industrial mobility and other sectors. That's correct what he's saying. in any case, not just because of the war in Ukraine, and even before, we were clear that we have to take up some measures in order to decrease our dependency, and we have to go along to our neighbor regions of the European Union for energy sources. Even before the war, it was clear that Ukraine will be one part of it, and Ukraine and others, also North Africa, for example. So what I want to say is we have to import some energies from that regions, that's for sure. And I'm not the one who has to decide in the end, because the market, the industry, the need, it will be, they will do it by themselves. They will see where it is needed. I know that we need so many electrolyzers in the next 10 years. We have to go this way. And finally, what I want to say is we have to import that. But me as a politician, as a rapporteur, I have to deliver in the end at least the infrastructure for the heavy duty vehicles in my eyes. Because Christina mentioned that before the intervention of Tata, that we don't have a homogeneous situation all around the European Union. We have member states who are already in a good shape, I would say, but we have also member states with a real level of infrastructure, alternative infrastructure. They have also at the same time compared to other member states, a weak electricity grid. For this electricity grid, we need investments, and as long as this is not the case, we need some second option, let me say like this. And the second option will be hydrogen in that sense. I know the efficiency is not as that what is direct electrification for sure, but this second option can only be in a mountainous regions, you know what I mean, where the grid is too weak. So with this hydrogen, you can change it, you can convert it with chemical processes, you can stock it in an easy way, you can transport it, and you can use it for vehicles, for the mobility in the wider sense as well. But for sure, we will need, I would say, 1,000 times more electricity, renewable energy what we have right now. And if this is the case, I'm sure that there won't be a competition anymore between the industry and the mobility. At least this is my prediction.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ertug, for your intervention. And this is the kind of interaction exactly that our audience, they learn a lot from it, but it's also a representation of the challenges that we currently face on EU level. And let's not forget exactly that right now we are in a situation, especially with the current political updates, where we need fast solutions, but in a way that everybody can adopt the measures and they can adapt as well. To this regard, I would like to pick up a statement from Ms. Silke Conrad, mentioning exactly what has been touched upon during the discussion. So practically, the challenge will be to get the population on board with the current rising energy prices. And then when we have a risk for any climate measures like the CO2 pricing, this will not be accepted. Simultaneously, the industry will have to meet very strict targets, and they will most probably need the assistance of public funding. So we need the green transition to happen in a way that's going to be smart, realistic, and also do any necessary transformation and meet the targets that we have. More ambition is needed as well. And of course, we should not neglect the fact that we have EU policymakers right now that they really try to reach a consensus in areas that they can be very sensitive, and especially each member state, they have different priorities and different needs. So this is something for sure that we take into account. To this regard, following the statement from Silke, I would like to pass to you a question from Ilias Bafounis from the DeHavilland EU policy team, which he mentioned that there are a lot of Fit for 55 proposals that they will have a financial cost both for the consumers and for the industry. So this is a question for Mr. Ismail Ertug. would you consider the transition periods that they are proposed are enough to compensate any costs for the industry? What do you think?
Yes, I think that's clear. We are making legislations for the public. We don't do it for privates, that's for sure. So the after also goes into the direction of public infrastructure. Nevertheless, the industry and after Corona, after pandemic, after the war, they will need some support by the taxpayers. Let me say it like this, by the society, and we are doing that, by the way. When you look to the Recovery and Resilience Funds, which is dedicated to the pandemic, but even there you have some funds where the member states can use for the deployment of these kind of infrastructure. First, second, we have other funds such as the Connecting Europe facility, for example, which can be used for these kind of infrastructure. And there are many private money, by the way. There are. I know that personally, some investment funds are really specifically looking to the outcome of the AFIR because they want to see the commitment of the policymakers for example, hydrogen. They want to see that in that moment when these legislations go through, they will invest. I wouldn't say that there is a lack of money, at least in the private area, there is enough money. The pension funds and the different investment funds, they don't know where to invest the money. Let's say best, even if it sounds a little bit strange within these days, but they want to use the money in the most efficient way. And hydrogen, for example, is one part of it. And with a mixture of private and the public money, I'm sure we will be able, as European Union, ramp up our ambition and to ramp up our infrastructure. And I don't want to make it at that stage a difference or a distinction between mobility and industry and others. They will interact with each other. And in my eyes, mobility is also industry. It's not coming from the moon. So we have to do this. And if the transport and the mobility should be decarbonized, we need these kind of investments, and it has to come fast. It has to come substantially. And for this, I'm optimistic, to be honest.
Maybe if I could just jump in. I mean, from my side, a lot of our clients are investors, and one of the things that they're really looking for is long-term stability when it comes to the policy framework. And I think that picks up a little bit on the point that Conrad was raising. I mean, you take that the Commission has sometimes a tendency to draft legislation and set targets, which it then changes after a couple of years. I mean, you look at the Renewable Energy Directive as an example. It was reviewed in 2018, transposed into national legislation in 2020, and then it's revised again in 2021, which is not offering enough stability for industry when it comes to making investments. If one fuel is favoured one year and then another fuel is favoured another year. I mean, Renewable Energy Directive, the second one, didn't talk a lot about hydrogen. Now it's setting some very ambitious targets for 2020 and 2030 rather, and that will require significant investment, which industry, I think, rightly or wrongly, are perhaps cautious to make because maybe those targets will change again in a few years. So it's really important to have that long-term view. And yeah, I think obviously the money which has been proposed for Repower EU is significant, and hopefully it will trickle down into making those investments possible and to reaching those goals.
Thank you very much, Kieran and Mr. Ertug, for your comments and for your answers. For us, it's very important as well, yes, to hear all opinions, and something that it's very, very valuable for the overall dialogue and the negotiations. To this regard, time flies, especially when you have such interesting speakers and panelists and giving you so many overviews. So I think we managed to do the impossible, to wrap up and summarize the Fit for 55 state of play in 1 hour. And I cannot thank enough our speakers for this. Thank you all for your contributions. I'm pretty sure our audience appreciated as well. I would like to thank the audience for their engagement and their questions. Please follow our participants and MEP, Mr. Ismail Ertug, for their activities. I'm sure we have a lot to see, and any kind of negotiations that will be very, very helpful for our practices. I would like to thank you all for attending today's event in DeHavilland. Please follow us on social media, send us any inquiries you might have. We take great pride for bringing together different stakeholders to talk about topics that they are very interesting for our daily life and for our work practice as well. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to us. And I would like to wish everyone to have a lovely day and thank you all for your participation.